Welcome to We Hope in God channel. We are so glad you've joined us for this deep dive. Our mission today is, well, it's pretty simple. We are opening up God's Word, and we're trying to treat it less like a textbook and more like a treasure map.
I like that.
Yeah, we're looking for those nuggets of grace, those insights that can really speak to our daily walk with Christ. So think of this as just joining us during our quiet time, trying to find a small light for the path ahead.
And that light often shines brightest when we look at the history of God's people. Today, we're focusing on Moses' final instructions. That really powerful recollection he gave in Deuteronomy, right before Israel finally crossed into the Promised Land.
Right.
He's recounting decades of God's guidance through the wilderness, and it all leads up to a series of military commands. Most of them are about conquest, but one. One really stands out as a specific, almost baffling exception.
It's so fascinating how context changes everything, isn't it? I mean, if you're reading Deuteronomy, you are right in the middle of this massive campaign. Nations are falling because they're opposing God's plan. So when you get to chapter 2, you're just expecting more of the same, more marching orders for battle.
Exactly. Let's look directly at the text. We're focusing on Deuteronomy chapter 2, and specifically verse 19. Moses is relaying the direct instruction from the Lord. He says, "When you come to the Ammonites, do not harass them or provoke them to war, for I will not give you possession of any land belonging to the Ammonites. I have given it as a possession to the descendants of Lot."
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. That's the definition of a shocking command in that context. Israel is literally about to take the land they were promised for centuries. But here, God draws this specific, uncrossable line in the sand. He says, you will not touch this nation. And not only that, he gives the reason because he has already given that land to Lot's descendants. And the question that just immediately jumps out is, why? Why spare the Ammonites? I mean, why, after 400 years of history, are Lot's descendants still covered by this level of divine protection?
Right.
The other nations, the Amorites, the Canaanites, they were targets. Why not these guys?
And that's where we really have to shift into reflection, because to understand the depth of this grace, you have to look at the messy, highly imperfect history of the man who started this nation, Lot, Abraham's nephew.
And when you look at Lot's story, it is not a legacy of, merit or amazing faith. It's a story just marked by spiritual compromise and poor choices, one right after another.
It starts early on. Remember that conflict with Abraham back in Genesis 13? Both of them had grown so prosperous that their herdsmen started quarreling over land.
Right, not enough room.
Exactly. And Abraham, in this amazing act of faith and generosity, he just says, "Lot, you pick first." And Lot looks out and sees the lush, well-watered plain of the Jordan, which led directly toward Sodom.
That is the classic choice of sight over faith. Abraham takes the rougher country, trusting God will provide, while Lot, he chooses what looks like immediate prosperity, the good life.
The good life, right next to a city that was notorious for its wickedness. And he didn't just, pass through Sodom. He moved in. He pitched his tent toward it. Then he lived in it. And by the time judgment came, he was literally sitting at the city gate.
Which was a position of authority?
A position of authority and influence, yes. His poor judgment led him right into the heart of spiritual danger. And our sources really highlight the consequences of that. He lived among people so wicked, God was about to destroy them. And his family, they became deeply entrenched there.
Yeah, his daughters married men from Sodom. It speaks volumes about how fast compromise can just erode a family's spiritual foundation.
It does.
He made choices that absolutely did not merit any future divine favor. I mean, he failed to lead his family. He chose the world. He compromised his faith for what he thought was wealth.
And when judgment finally came, Lot he was basically dragged out of the fire. He was rescued, but only just barely. And Genesis 19, verse 29, gives us the critical piece of information. It says, when God destroyed the cities, he rescued Lot because he remembered Abraham.
Wow. So he was a beneficiary of grace, not a recipient of a reward.
That's it, exactly.
He was saved only because of his connection to a man of covenant, not because of anything he himself had done. It was all external mercy.
And the mess just continued. Even after he was rescued, he flees to the mountains. He's fearful. And his daughters, they devise a plan that results in a really dark, incestuous situation.
A truly broken beginning.
A profoundly broken beginning. And out of that failure, Lot fathered 2 sons, Moab and Ammon, the founders of these nations.
So if we're looking at this from a human perspective, just as observers, the logical conclusion would be rejection. This nation was literally born of sin.
Mm.
It was raised in compromise, and it was often an enemy to Israel. The human expectation is that centuries later, the Ammonites should face destruction, just like their neighbors. I mean, they had every reason to be condemned.
Yet, God did not reject them. That's what is so fascinating here. Centuries later, Israel is commanded, maintain their border, respect their territory, do not harass them. God actively protects them. It just defies all human logic of reward and punishment.
Which brings us to the core reason, the theological connection. Why the protection? If it wasn't about the Ammonites' goodness or Lot's merits, it has to be entirely about the character of God.
Precisely. This is the synthesis that turns a historical command into a spiritual revelation. God keeps his promises completely, faithfully, to the very, very end.
So it all comes back to Abraham.
It all comes back to the covenant with Abraham. That original promise was so steadfast, so powerful, that its protective umbrella just extended outward, covering even Abraham's imperfect, compromising, failure-prone relative, Lot.
So this command in Deuteronomy is God saying, I remember.
Yes, I remember Abraham, the man who walked with me. And because I keep my word, the descendants of his nephew, as messy as their lineage is, they are safe from your sword.
The key takeaway then is that God's faithfulness literally outlasted their failures. I mean, think about the longevity of that. Hundreds of years passed, generations lived in sin, and yet the tether of that ancient promise, it held firm.
It's a profound demonstration that God's commitments are not based on our stability or our worthiness. They're based entirely on his own character.
So, okay, what does this all mean for us today? This ancient mandate about a border in the Near East. How does it reveal a truth about God's grace in our own lives? If you're listening to this, what's the light it shines on you?
Well, it reveals a God whose commitments are incredibly resilient. Look at Lot's failures again. The compromises, the tragic beginning of his descendants. The protection of that land tells us three things about God's promises for you right now. First, God's promises are stronger than our present weaknesses. Lot was weak, yet God's strength covered him. You might be struggling with a weakness today, but the promise of Christ isn't diminished by your current strength level.
That's good.
Second, God's promises are deeper than our past failures. Lot's failures were, well, they were comprehensive, but God's grace went deeper than all those catastrophic mistakes. So maybe you carry deep regret over past decisions. This tells us that God's commitment to you is deeper than your history of mistakes.
And the third,
And this is maybe the most encouraging part, God's promises are wider than our broken beginnings. Lot's descendants started in such a sinful, messy situation. Yet, the scope of God's grace was wide enough to encompass even that.
that really hits home. Because we often live focusing on our own instability. We feel like, oh, I blew it yesterday, so surely the coverage is gone today. Or we look back at our origins, the family we were born into, the struggles, and we think that somehow disqualifies us.
But this command about the Ammonites, it proves otherwise. Even when our story begins with witness, or it continues with repeated mistakes, God's fundamental promises, the ones anchored in Christ, they do not change.
So the covenant isn't conditional on us suddenly becoming perfect.
Not at all. It's conditional on God's perfect ability to remember and to act on his word.
It really changes the focus, doesn't it? Instead of constantly looking at our own limitations and our failures, we can meditate on the God who is consistently, perfectly faithful. The Ammonites didn't earn that safety. They just received the overflow of a promise made to someone else.
And we receive the overflow of the ultimate promise made to us through Christ. That's the enduring comfort. The grace we receive isn't some fragile thing dependent on our latest performance. It is anchored in the memory of the eternal God.
So we started with this specific, surprising command in Deuteronomy chapter 2, this geopolitical anomaly. And we discovered that this moment of protection for the undeserving was rooted entirely in God remembering the covenant he made with Abraham, just showcasing this immovable grace.
May the God who kept his promise to Lot's descendants, protecting their land despite their broken beginnings, keep our lives, our steps, and our future in his steadfast love. He is a God whose memory is perfect and whose promises stand forever.
May each meditation be a small light for your walk with Christ. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
In the wilderness, you led us day by day. Every step we took, you made a way. You reminded us of all your guiding grace, how your promise never faded from its place. You protected those you called your own. Even Lot's sons found mercy at your throne. Your covenant stands firm through every land. Your faithfulness still holds us by the hand. When our stories start with brokenness, your mercy shapes our lives again. You move beyond our weakness and lift us with your faithful hand. Your faithful hand. In the wilderness, you led us day by day. Every step we took, you made a way. You reminded us of all your guiding grace, how your promise never faded from its place. You protected those you called your own. Even Lot's sons found mercy at your throne. Your covenant stands firm through every land. Your faithfulness still holds us by the hand. When our stories start with brokenness, your mercy shapes our lives again. You move beyond our weakness and lift us with your faithful hand. Faithful to the end, you never change. Promise keeping God through every age. Stronger than our past, your love remains faithful to the end.